Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Social Work England session. My name is Gavin Morgan. I'm a social worker and I work for Social Work England. This session is called How Do We Use Data to Transform Social Work and How It Is Regulated. And I'm really excited to be watching the session myself. I'll be passing you over to our speakers shortly. But just before I do that, I'm just going to talk you through a few key points. First of all, as this slide makes reference to, we want you to know that you provided some of your personal information to enable you to join this session, and that information is managed privately, and we will only use it solely for the purposes in which you've allowed us to use it. Furthermore, from a legal disclaimer here is that the views and opinions expressed by third parties during Social Work Week are the speaker's own, and they don't necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Social Work England. And just bear in mind that we haven't endorsed third-party content and don't accept liability for the content of any opinions from other organisations. And you'll see here there's some instructions on how to on some of the functions for Microsoft Teams. You will have noticed that our chat function is not currently enabled, and also your microphones and cameras have also been disabled. And the reason is not to prevent people taking part in discussions. It's just that because of the sheer numbers of people who join these sessions, it makes it easier for us to be able to work the session and manage it appropriately. But that said, there will be an opportunity to submit some questions, and hopefully, if there's time at the end, the panel will be able to look and answer some of those questions. If you wish to use closed captions, there's an option to do that, and you just have to go to the three dots on the taskbar, and that will give you the option to use the closed captions option. In terms of event etiquette, we know that social work can be quite a challenging profession, and sometimes the content that comes out of that can be distressing and provide triggers for people. So please be mindful of this and take whatever steps you need to, whether it's taking yourself away from the screen for a period of time, to keep yourself safe. We also ask that people are respectful of each other when contributing, and we do reserve the right to remove people from the session if we feel there's any disruptive behaviour. We really want your thoughts and feedback, and during the course of this session there will be a link sent to a survey which we're going to ask you to complete. It helps us to plan future events that we might have. And finally, this is all part of Social Work Week. We've had some really good sessions across the week. We have some more planned as well for tomorrow. And we do hope that you join some of those sessions if you haven't already signed up to do so. And have a look at some of our social media feeds for comments, and do share any positive comments that you have on social media as well. Anyway, without further ado, I'm now going to pass to our first speaker, Natalie Day. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gavin, and welcome everybody to this event as part of Social Work Week. I'm Natalie Day and I'm Assistant Director for Policy and Strategy at Social Work England, and I'm delighted to be the chair of this event, so helping facilitate this hopefully really rich conversation about data and how we use data to transform social work and how it's regulated. I'm delighted that we have a brilliant lineup for this hour of discussion, bringing together the chief execs from 4 of the regulators across the devolved nation. So we've got Maree, Allison from Scottish Social Services Council, Declan McAllister from Northern Ireland, Sarah McCarthy from Social Care Wales, and our own chief exec, Colum Conway from Social Work England. So a really stellar lineup, and really looking forward to hearing from all of our speakers today, and then having a really rich discussion about data. because we really want to, over this next hour or so, just explore the role that regulation plays in that gathering, analysing and sharing of data, and how that can drive forward really positive change in the social work profession, and really sort of trying to draw on the kind of unique perspectives and the window into the profession that we as regulators are able to draw from our registers, and just explore, I think, over the next hour or so, how best to harness that information, both as individual regulators, but also what we might do collectively in this area. So I think hopefully a really rich discussion and looking forward to it. As Gavin mentioned, there is a Q&A function. Please do use that. You might not be able to see it come up, but we're very, very keen in this session to have some really interactive discussion with our panelists, and to really sort of probe some questions and think about the way that data is changing the way regulation works. The format for today, with that in mind, is we've asked all of our speakers to do just a couple of slides each, from each regulator, to sort of to give us a bit of an overview of the sorts of data and things that they have and how that works for their individual regulator. And then, as we said, we'll open it all up. So each speaker will talk for maximum 5 minutes or so, and then we'll kind of open it up to Q&A. So do put those Q&A into the session, and we'll look forward to that. I was really delighted to chair this session last year with all of our regulators, and I think last year we called it like a kind of Graham Norton sort of chat style host, and so we're going to kind of try and do that again in terms of a much more conversational part for this presentation. I think Graham is currently in Australia at the moment, and it's Claudia Winkleman sitting in the couch for him, and so we'll be channeling Claudia perhaps this year rather than Graham, but very much in the sort of chat show sort of format rather than her traitors role. So because that could be quite a different event if we took a sort of more traitors approach to this panel, but we won't do that. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Maree in Scotland, who's going to give us a couple of slides, and we'll go through the speakers as we said, and then open it up for questions and comments. So do pop them in the chat, and we'll go from there. Over to you, Maree.
Thanks so much, Natalie. Just really hoping that I don't get chucked off the red chair for a less than stellar performance today. So hello everyone, I'm Maree Allison, and I'm the Chief Executive at the Scottish Social Services Council, SSC, in Scotland. So I'm joining you today from kind of cloudy and cold Dundee, and I'm so grateful to our friends at Social Work England for inviting me along today to celebrate the amazing life-changing work that social workers do all across the UK. It's a real honour to be here. I should say earlier on today I had a big black screen of death, and my entire laptop just completely cut out of me during a meeting. So if I suddenly disappear, my apologies. I will hopefully pop back on a minute or two later, but somebody else might have to take over from me. So we're just going to spend a couple of minutes giving a bit of background about what regulation for us in Scotland looks like. So we have the responsibility to register and regulate the social service workforce in Scotland. So we have really quite a large register of 176,000 people, but only about 13,000 of them are social workers and students. The rest of the people on our register work in children and young people services, so residential childcare, early years settings, or in adult social care. And we also register the inspectors who carry out the service inspection function in Scotland, the Care Inspectorate. Similar to our regulatory colleagues across the UK, we have that responsibility to set the standards of conduct and practice for the profession, and we also set a code of practice for employers. So people employing social workers or other workers on our register have a complementary responsibility along with the workforce to comply with the code, and that code is very much about ensuring that employers are supporting their staff in terms of their meeting their regulatory responsibilities and providing the best care and support possible for people using services. And we also set the qualification requirements. So for social workers, the requirements around the social work degree, and we quality assure those degree programs. And we also have that responsibility around developing the workforce. So we do a lot of work around continuous professional learning and really supporting the workforce's professional development. But we also have a specific statutory responsibility around collecting workforce data. So we have been producing data reports since 2008 and are actually an official statistics provider. So we have now this really long history of data reports on the workforce, including the social work part of the registered workforce, which is able to show and demonstrate those long trends over time about the workforce. And as well as looking at the sort of nuts and bolts of how many people there are in the workforce, it very much focuses, those workforce data reports very much focus on things like what type of contracts people are on, if they're working full-time, which geographic areas they are in. So trying to get a real oversight of the extent of that workforce, if people are working in children and family settings, if they're working in adult service settings. But alongside that, we're also carry out other types of data analysis and reporting. So we do some work around things like digital capabilities, looking at workforce skills report, have undertaken some research around duly qualified social workers' experience, and more recently are producing lots more data and publishing data that is about our live registrant information. So looking at things around fitness to practice, for example. And I think moving forward, what we are going to start producing in the next couple of months are information and data that is much more about the workforce's experience. So we've started running a regular survey for everyone leaving the register, trying to understand, if you're a social worker and you've decided to leave the profession, why is that? Is it retirement? Is it health? Is it pressures of work? Is it caring responsibilities? And trying to really understand what's driving people to leave. And also following in the footsteps of our colleagues in Wales, have just concluded our first survey of trying to really allow the entire workforce to have their say about their experience in work, how they're finding their employer, how supportive they are, what their workload pressures are like. So we're really looking forward to getting the first report on that and publishing that later in the year. So that's a snapshot tour of regulation in Scotland and some of the data that we are producing and publishing. So I'm handing over now, I think, to, is it Sarah next?
Over to
Declan.
Declan, sorry, got it completely wrong.
Thanks, Maree. Thank you. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Declan McAllister. I am the Interim Chief Executive of the Northern Ireland Social Care Council. Moving into my 29th year working alongside the social work profession here in Northern Ireland, having previously set up the Guardian ad litem service, so that's in Children and Family Services, way back in 1996. Joined the council in 2017 and now have the wonderful position as Interim Chief Executive. Always describe myself as quite a generalist in all areas, but data and intelligence and digital has been my background in terms of expertise. So really looking forward today to really reflect on the importance of data and intelligence, particularly in relation to promoting, making visible the social work profession, and we'll share some of the work we're doing here locally in Northern Ireland. Look, first of all, I want to say a big thank you to Social Work England for inviting me along here today to really reflect some of the areas of work, particularly around data and social work here in Northern Ireland, to what I see as a wonderful audience across the UK. So at the moment, Social Care Council, we are a public body of government. We report to the Department of Health. And in many respects, we, like Maree and Social Care Wales, we also register not just social work, but we also regulate social care workers here in Northern Ireland. And yesterday, we actually, our register moved to a position of 49,000 registrants. Of course, as of today, we have 6,767 social workers registered to work here and practice in Northern Ireland. I want to say a little bit about, I suppose, the council. We're very much a people-driven organisation. We hold Investors in People Platinum. It's the highest you can get, but we work very hard at ensuring the investment in our people in terms of how they deliver our services. Similar to Maree, we've got key statutory functions around registration, around regulation and fitness to practice, and also in terms of continuous professional development. It's a statutory requirement here in Northern Ireland, particularly for social work. So we are an awarding body for continuous professional development for social work, and very much have been running that for almost 15 years, providing qualifications, particularly at master's and doctorate level, for continued development for all of our social workers here in Northern Ireland. And we're a particularly small council, looking after, as I say, at the moment, over 49,000 registrants. We're a team of 58 whole-time equivalents, or what that converts to is 64 people working across 4 to 5 key functions here in the organisation at the council. So I do want to say a little bit about where we are with data and intelligence. I think that this has really been a work in progress here in Northern Ireland. When I joined in 2017, I really pestered the Department of Health here in Northern Ireland for quite a bit of time to say we really need to invest in better data and intelligence, particularly about the social work and social care workforce. Thankfully, they listened to my plea, and we now have regular investment year on year on top of our normal statutory duties to actually provide better visibility of the social work and social care register. And we'll probably talk a little bit later on the importance of that for a regulator, because this is an umbrella. We have an umbrella visibility of the entire workforce practicing social work here in Northern Ireland. And part of our public-facing register, we now can provide a great deal of characteristics about that workforce that we'll probably talk a little bit later around how we support recruitment and retention and skills development. So all of that is now available in real-time intelligence through the register. What I would say in terms of how that has developed over the last number of years, overall, we've seen a 5% growth in register numbers. We deal with about 900 registrant applications, so that's across social work and social care every month. And let's say we do our very best to manage that without delay for the particular applicants. But in relation to the social work piece, we obviously are very much aware of the challenges facing all social work professions across the UK around recruitment and retention. But over the last 12 to 15 years, we have witnessed a 26% increase in that registered social work workforce here in Northern Ireland. And literally, if you look at that just before COVID in 2019, we actually see an increase of about 7%. And that's down really to investment within the workforce by the Department of Health. I suppose improved recognition, improved campaigning to encourage probably students to actually consider social work as a career of choice. Interestingly, then, in some of those characteristics about the register, things that we can see on a regular basis, we know 85% of our social work register are female, 15% male. Interestingly, as well, in terms of age range, females actually make up the largest age range of 40 to 49, whereas males make up the largest age range of 50 to 59. Don't know why that is. Potentially some research in the future why that might suggest that position. But I do want to talk a little bit about what our data intelligence provides us, and this is around stability of the social work workforce here in Northern Ireland. Overarchingly, we have almost 74% will stay on the register longer than 10 years. We've actually seen as well 70% of that are staying on beyond 20 years, with a small 3.4% then staying on above 30 years. And this is really important because the Social Care Council is now directly connected to the department around the whole aspect of social work improvement, around data and intelligence, and the importance of data intelligence to actually setting out better workforce planning here in Northern Ireland for social work. I think in terms of some of our work that we've done recently, where we've engaged and surveyed the social work workforce, particularly around this area of data and intelligence, social workers want better data, they want better systems. And actually, it's probably a sense of there's so much frustration out there, particularly among the social work workforce, when they talk about admin and bureaucracy. And we need to actually provide that hard data, that hard intelligence and evidence to actually enable decision makers to actually make decisions that change that perspective, actually improve the systems that we have that social workers use in Northern Ireland. And in many respects, the regulator, ourselves here in Northern Ireland, is seen as a system leader and a partner within that particular work alongside the Department of Health. Look, that's really all I wanted to say at this moment in time. Really looking forward to the conversations and the panel discussion. And I'm going to hand over to Sarah in Wales. Thank you.
Diolch, thank you. So, prynawn da, Sarah dwi I Gofal Cymdeithasol Cymru. So, good afternoon, I'm Sarah from Social Care Wales. And just to start off with a thanks to colleagues in Social Work England for setting up today's event and enabling us to all come together and to have this conversation. I think that's really important for our work together and to hear some of the questions from colleagues across the UK when we're looking at data. So we said we'd look at a bit about, well, what do some of our different organisations do? So I wanted to start off really with our vision as Social Care Wales, and for us that is to make a positive difference for care and support in Wales for children, adults and their families and carers. So like Scottish Social Services Council, Northern Ireland Social Care Council, we do support social workers but also social care workers, and we've got a role around supporting the early years and childcare workforce too. So quite broad in terms of the range of professions. But we've also in Social Care Wales got quite a wide breadth of functions that we perform as an organisation. We've heard already from Maree and Declan in terms of work around professional regulation and the standards that underpin that. That's the same for us too in Wales in terms of that really key role as a regulator. We also have a key role in terms of workforce development. So we work collaboratively with the sector to develop long-term. We've got a 10-year workforce strategy for health and social care in Wales. We've got a number of workforce plans that sit under those. We have a 3-year social workforce plan that we co-produce together with the sector to identify where are the key areas then that we need to take action together, where do we need to be responding. We also have a role in supporting and sharing good practice and notable practice, and we do a lot around research, data and innovation. So some of that work, some of what colleagues in my team can do, where the sector's told us they need greater insight and information, but perhaps colleagues don't have time to read all of the latest journals, our team will pull together that evidence into really easily digestible summaries of information. So for example, we've got evidence summaries on, well, what does trauma-informed practice really look like? Where can I go to get the latest information and intelligence? We share things on different projects and initiatives that are happening across Wales so that we can support the sharing of good and notable practice. And we've done a lot of work on data too. So some of the sort of data maps that Declan, you were showing in terms of almost portals where colleagues can go in and look at the data themselves and be able to really interrogate that for what your needs might be. We share workforce data, but we also share other recognised social care data in Wales. We'll look at service data that's available and published by other bodies, not just utilising our own data too. Our support for the sector really sits around supporting service improvement and supporting innovation. So we've got a number of functions where we're supporting the sector in how can we really improve strengths-based practice, how can we support positive cultures within our care settings, how can we support our leaders within the organisation, as well as the sort of CPD and wider work that Maree and Declan focused on. So I won't go into more of that. I could probably speak about all of those all day, but I'm not going to do that today because I promised Natalie I'd be less than 5 minutes. What we did say we talk about today, though, is we're celebrating Social Work Week this week, and I think there's just been a fabulous array of events and celebrations. So I think for those of us that work in the field, we recognise the important work that social workers do every day in all of our communities. But actually this week is a really good time to celebrate that. And I think that's important because some of our research shows that when we've tested the perception of the public, the perception of the sector is really high. The perception of social workers is good. When we ask the workforce what they feel, they think the public have got a really low perception of them. So there's something we need to do to be celebrating all of the practice that we know goes on and is of really good quality. So our register's about 63,000 individuals at the moment. Like I mentioned earlier, we do register social workers, social work students, but also care workers, domiciliary care workers, adult residential care home workers and managers, and so there's a much wider array. But what I've cut here is just some data that we produced in a summary about social workers in April last year, where we just did a pamphlet about, what is it that we know about social workers at the moment. And I think this is important because it helps bring to a wider audience the understanding of the global picture for us in Wales. It also helps us look at some of the areas that across the sector we've been collectively trying to respond to. So you'll see on this one here, we talk not just about the size of the workforce, but where we've seen growth, we can tie that back to the work our local authorities have been doing to really support grow your own approaches to support social workers. And it's an initiative we've been working and collaborating really closely on. But I also mentioned that we have a wider set of data that we can utilise as well. So much as we can pull data from the register, and that's really important because it tells us and gives us that global view about where we are. It helps us understand about how many social work students have we got, how likely we'll be able to respond to population demand. We can also feed in other sources of data. And so we always try and look at triangulating data from different sources. And at the bottom of the slide here, you can see some of the data from what social workers told us from our annual survey. So we can look at what, say, the turnover rates are like, and we can look at how many social workers are perhaps leaving the register. What the annual survey enables us to do is to understand why. So what's workforce wellbeing like for social workers? Do they feel supported at work? Do they have access to the wellbeing support that they need? How many people might be thinking of leaving the profession, or how many people have had access to the training and development that they needed? And we do that survey now on an annual basis so that we can be looking at themes and trends. And I'm hoping, Maree, as your survey launches, we'll also be able to compare across nations. So are there areas that one or other is doing better or worse at, but we might be able to learn from one another from the different contexts that we've got within each of the devolved nations across the UK. So that's all I was really going to say by means of introduction. I hope that gives a little bit of an introduction to the work of Social Care Wales and just a little bit on some of the data that we hold. So I'm going to hand over to you now, Colum.
Super. Thanks very much, Sarah. And thanks to Sarah and Maree and Declan for agreeing to come along today and for us to work together to present something about regulation and something about social work across the UK. And I want to thank everybody who's here. It's kind of really difficult to talk to a screen and be aware of how many people are in the room or how many people are listening. And I appreciate that it's also over lunchtime. So hopefully the general view is you've got us a bit on in the background while you're enjoying a good lunch as well, because that will be kind of important. So please don't let us interrupt that on you. I was interested in Gavin's introduction about if you find anything distressing in this presentation. I'm pretty sure there won't be much too distressing, so you can relax and enjoy your lunch. And one of the key reasons why we like to have a session like this at Social Work Week, and we try to do one each year, is partly to be able to show social workers across the piece that we as a group of regulators across the UK do work closely together and have good positive relationships and try to work in a way that's coherent and helpful to the sector. I mean, for people may not know, for those who may not know, that social work, the regulation of social work, is devolved to each of the 4 nations of the UK. And we would be the only profession in health and social care across the piece that have that arrangement. So, for example, doctors and nurses and others have the one regulator across the whole of the UK, the GMC and the NMC. So we're kind of different from that. And the reason I think that underlies that is because policy around health and child protection, child safeguarding, and other key policy areas are devolved to the individual jurisdictions, the different countries. So in a way, kind of what's happening in policy, what our government priorities do have a significant impact on social work, because so much of social work practice is linked to policy development in these important areas and potentially legislative development. So therefore, how social work is supported and regulated is devolved in that way. So I'm not. So I've lost my slides, so I'm not sure where they've gone. I don't know if anybody else has lost their slides as well, or if I've clicked a button that I shouldn't have clicked, then there we go. So if somebody in the background help get the slides up again, I'd be eternally grateful. So that's the reason why we have this session, and I'm really pleased that as a group of chief executives we try hard to communicate with each other. But also I think what it brings across as well is that there are significant differences in how we do things. The most significant of which is that Social Work England is the regulator for social workers only, and do not regulate other parts of social care, children's or adults, across the piece, unlike the other regulators. So our concentration is very much on social work. So when you can see from the figures that others have produced there, there are over 130,000 regulated social workers, registered social workers across the UK. So I just think from a sense of feeling part of something, and I know social work can be extraordinarily challenging in practice and can be quite a difficult job many times. I have always found it reassuring to feel part of a much bigger community, a much bigger practice community around social work, and I think that's such a big number. To think that, well, I'm connected to that, and a lot of work is going on to try and develop social work across the nations, which is always, I think, very reassuring. And the reason why we kind of looked at the potential of data in this section was because quite often people will look and go, well, what is it that regulators do? What is it that's important to regulators, and why, therefore, as a registrant, should that be important to me? So we will know that we all register social workers. That's done differently across the nations. We do it on an annual basis. We produce professional standards and hold people to those standards. We're concerned with and linked to continuous professional development and how people are continuing to keep themselves informed about their practice. We have a particular interest in education and training in terms of the regulation of those who provide education and training. And of course, we have the fitness to practice process where we deal with and address complaints that are made about social workers. But another key component of what we do is data and insight and research. And this is particularly important for us across the nations, but for us in Social Work England in particular also, because the policy of relating to social work across England is split with the Department of Education and the Department of Health. That wouldn't be the same in the other jurisdictions. And also, social workers are employed by a number of different authorities. I think it's over 250, and then beyond that, a number of other types of employers. And so therefore, registering all the social workers in England means that we are the only organisation that have a contact with and an interest in all social workers, regardless of where they're working and what they're doing. And that gives us an opportunity, therefore, to be able to produce information about social workers in England that nobody else has, because nobody else has that breadth of connection to all social workers. And I think that's why it's really important that we work on how we collect the data. And like others, we do it in different ways. So we earlier in the year had the first time we have done a survey of social workers, and we were able to produce some useful information for that. The response rate, while good enough to be able to draw some conclusions and analysis, was still quite low. And we'd really like to encourage people, when those sorts of surveys come, that it's not that we're looking for anything from you other than a bit of information that will help us bring colour and understanding to the sector. So that's the key for us. So you can see just from this slide that we glean information from what we do at renewals for the most part. And in renewals, we have two strands of information. One is the information that we gather sort of mandatory against the need to regulate social workers. What do we need to do to ensure that we have the information we need to be a regulator and have that on the register? And then we have another side, which is the voluntary side, a series of questions that can be answered voluntary or not, depending on what people want to do. Thankfully, the vast majority, over 95% of people, answer those voluntary questions, so it gives us greater depth to what we have. But areas of practice for social work in England, you can see in that slide, are split up across adult social care at about a third, children and family social care, and that will be the broadest context, both statutory and other work that happens with children and families, is about half the social workers. And then there are 9% that work in a whole range of other areas. And I always think the interesting piece in this as well is the 6% about which we know nothing. And so it's always important that we can fill that out as best we can and ensure it's as accurate as possible. What we do know for certain is that, like Declan mentioned earlier on, the number of registered social workers is increasing. From we went live in 2019, it's gone up about 10,000 additional registrants, which is useful information to have. And the geographic spread of social workers is useful information to have in terms of across the country, but also for planning purposes. So local authorities can look at this and see where the social workers are and what their planning needs might be. And it's not surprising that the biggest number are in the Midlands and in London. But the number that concerns me the most is the one at the bottom, unknown, 10,000. And that's, it's really important that we find a way to gather that information so it's as valid as humanly possible. And people mentioned earlier about workforce planning. So we're not as directly involved in workforce planning as the other regulators would be, but we try to provide information into it. And so, of course, the age profile of social workers is absolutely crucial, because for workforce planning. And you can see that there are not insignificant number of social workers, registered social workers, about a quarter of them that would be in the age range of 50 plus. So we always have to have in mind kind of what needs to happen in terms of workforce planning in order to ensure that we have a consistent number of social workers and the right sort of pipeline into that process. And then just in terms of a couple of other numbers, in our fitness to practice, we received last year almost 2,000 concerns. We receive about 150, 160 per month. But a lot of those concerns are dealt with at triage, and so there's a much smaller number that goes into investigations and through all. And for us, still the biggest number of complaints come from the public. And you can see that there. So it's just useful for us to have that information so that we can plan for ourselves as an organisation, but also to be able to feed that back out to the sector and help people understand where the risks are. And a big concern for us is quality, is education quality assurance. So we completed a 3-year inspection process for all the programmes across England, and that was 342 courses with 80 providers. So it's it's a large task. But again, that we'll be publishing later this year a report on what we learnt from that. And I think that will be very valuable for the HCI sector, for those who provide the programmes, so that they can adjust and amend as required. And you can see there that the largest number of social work courses are master's courses. So again, that gives us an opportunity to be able to feed in to that process and be able to advise and assist in the planning of the programmes across across the whole of England. And when you're dealing with that numbers, you need data to help people understand the context of that. So that'll be a very useful report later in the year. So there are just a few things that we kind of that we kind of highlight and look for, and really just try to give life to what the social work sector looks like across England, for the first time in a long time, to be able to really focus as a specialist regular on social work, and be able to provide the data that would be very useful in other places. So we would always encourage people to try and answer the questions that we ask. It's not in any individual sense, but it is to be able to put this collective picture together. And only Social Work England, because of the connection we have, are in the position to be able to do that across the whole piece. So that was my piece. I think we were hoping now. I think I'm handing back to Natalie or Claudia to pick up a few questions that we might be able to assist in terms of other responses. So over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Colum, and thanks to all our speakers for their really helpful contributions in terms of outlining the sorts of data that they collect and how they use that. So we might take down the slides now, and as we said, open it up. Everybody get on the couch for a bit more of a conversation now across you all. And it's just also really helpful just to hear the different journey that all of our regulators have been on. At Social Work England, we've obviously been, we're relatively new to this game, whereas others have been sort of doing this for sort of 12 or so years, and really building up that kind of data bank and insights that is informing practice. So, I mean, just to kind of kick off the Q&A, and as I said to the viewers at home, please do put Q&As into the chat, and I'll put those to our speakers. But I guess it has been really interesting to hear how all the different regulators use data. But I guess if we were to come back to sort of basic principles, it'd be useful to just sort of perhaps Maree and Declan, thrown to you first. I mean, why is this important? I mean, why is it important part of regulation to collect data, to analyse data, and disseminate data on the social work profession? And I think related to that, there's a sort of question about, and for what? Why is it important, but also what impact does it have to collect this data? How does it have a sort of meaningful impact on some of the key issues for the profession? And we've talked a little bit about retention and recruitment, etc. But I wonder, perhaps Maree and Declan, to throw to you first, if you might reflect on the importance and then the impact that data could have.
Yeah, I mean, I think we probably all touched a bit on this, that some of it is about almost the boring stuff about us understanding the profile of the workforce and how they interact with us as a regulator, so we can ensure that we have the right staff and systems to carry out our functions. But much more than that, it's the whole purpose we're here is improving the lives of people who receive care and support. And as the only organisation that has that reach into all of the social workers on our individual registers, we're the people that know the demographics, know why they're joining the profession, why they're leaving the profession, if they're intending staying, if they're intending moving, what support they're receiving, so that we can reflect all of that back, some of it about things we can do, but we can reflect it back to people that have maybe more hands on levers than we do, that can deal with some of the real underlying problems that cause recruitment and retention issues. And why I think that's probably one of the most important areas to focus on is our chief social work advisor to government, Iona Colvin. She did a video for Social Work Week talking about some of those challenges and highlighting that some of the research that's been carried out has shown that care experienced children, one of the biggest things that makes a difference to the outcome in their lives is consistency of social worker working with them. So it's so important that we are able to retain people in the profession to work alongside the people who need their care and support. So I think for us, that's really why it's really important that we're getting the data we need and we're reflecting it back to those who can do some of the things that we can't do.
I suppose, Natalie, not to repeat what Maree said, all of that as well in relation to regulation of social work here in Northern Ireland. But there's also those other key pieces, I think, that impact on the social work profession. And I suppose, having worked alongside the social work profession for a number of years, so things like, young person having a consistent social worker available to them through their family law process is really, really critical, particularly around adult, and particularly people working with elderly, they want to see the same individual trying to manage and support and develop their care plan to ensure a better quality of life. So it is critically important, I think, for the regulator to realise, I suppose, that we have that umbrella of the profession. Here in Northern Ireland, we have 5 trusts who employ probably about 75% of the social work register currently today. But what we find is they're very much involved within their organisation, trying to workforce plan solely within their boundaries for the area they cover here in Northern Ireland. And while we don't have a statutory responsibility for workforce planning, we can see very clearly that the department need that oversight of what this social workforce looks like. And it's exactly what Colum said. So, the numbers we need coming in, because we can see the numbers actually retiring or leaving the profession. A couple of other reasons why we're key to this. Yeah, we're legislatively mandated to collect particular information that helps with public protection and making sure we get the right people in the right place at the right time with the right skills. But I think in essence, what we also have is we have regular trends, updates, that we can actually put our finger on that pulse in terms of, well, what is CPD like for the social work profession across the jurisdiction? We can see that whole aspect of continuous professional development. We know here in Northern Ireland, probably about 50% of our registered workforce actually engage in CPD beyond their social work degree, and we need to improve on that. So there's a myriad of reasons why we need to really connect our information back into all of those other social work data sets that sit around different employers, and other reasons why we collect. But hopefully that gives you a sense of what we're trying to do to really connect up key information to really make that whole, even areas of capacity, areas of future requirement and need for the workforce. It's so critical that we start to think about connecting up these data sets.
Thanks.
Natalie, can I come in there as well, just from an England perspective too, there's a couple of other things that I think are quite important from our perspective. We're very supportive of the notion that social work is one profession, and regardless of where people are working as a registered social worker with Social Work England, it's one profession. And so I think it's really important then that we're able to, I don't want to overuse the word, I don't want to misconstrue the word authority, but to have the data gives us a little bit of evidence and leverage in terms of being able to talk about the whole profession in its whole context, which is really important, I think, in England, because it's very hard to capture that anywhere else. And the second thing I would just add with that kind of, again, that idea of authority being at least having information that others may not have is, I don't know if people saw, we did that program around Change the Script, where, we were looking at, talking about social workers and talking to the media. And thankfully now with some additional funding from the department, we're going to have a second phase of that, which will continue to do that. But what the people that we're talking to, particularly media and others, want to know, well, what gives you the authority to say anything, and why would you be saying it, and what what story have you got to tell us? And so it's the fact that we're able to engage and gather information from all social workers across all the piece gives you that ability then to be able to say, here's the picture and here's something that you can understand and disseminate out as part of that process. Because I think that's quite an important area as well, to help people who are looking at social work but don't necessarily understand it, to help them connect to it, because you've got information that's useful to them.
No, thank you all for that. Oh, sorry, you want to come in?
Just briefly, Nasty, I think for me, the bit we've picked up on the importance of sort of being able to inform and influence, and I think we've articulated that really well in terms of being able to have that data set so we can help others be able to understand the profession and where we are. But I think it's also making sure that we're using that data to create change and action. So, and I can think of a number of examples now about where we've been able to use data from the register to work with our partners to make a difference for social workers. So we've been able to increase bursary levels within Wales, for instance. We were able to do some dedicated work with our agency social workers to understand why they might have taken that as an employment route. And I think we can't lose sight of that importance of being able to use data to help us understand and then work with partners to create a change that improves working conditions for social workers, but also ultimately improves lives for individuals that social workers are working with. So I don't want us to underestimate the importance of data and being able to take us on that full journey.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, Sarah, because as everybody mentioned through the presentation, you get some data in a broad context that nearly always leads, like lots of good research, nearly always leads to just another question, and that so you've got the data and you say, okay, so we've got quite a younger age group here, but they're not following through, so people are leaving earlier in the profession than we would expect. Why is that? And so we're at our organisation, I know you guys do as well, we're developing a more developed approach to research and strategy that's looking at, well, what is it that we know and what do we need, either us or someone else, to look further at and investigate further so that we have a better idea. So it kind of throws up gaps in understanding, which means that gives us the opportunity to really develop a good approach that will help shape and influence policy and practice in all sorts of different ways.
And so just sort of looking at some of the questions that are coming through from the audience, which is great. There's sort of a real interest in this sort of expertise around data that we can see across the regulators. But I think there's also that kind of point that with data comes much responsibility, how can we ensure that, and how can we reassure our registrants and the general public, etc., that the data that we hold, that it's safe, that we've got the sort of appropriate protections in place. But at the same time, a bit sort of touching on what you were saying in your remarks, Colum, about also kind of reassuring colleagues or those that when we're asking for data, that the reasons why we're asking for it, why it's important for us to have a kind of really robust picture. So I guess I'm interested in any reflections on how we kind of both acknowledge any nervousness around sharing data and how and our responsibility to ensure people that we're using it for the appropriate means and for the improvements and so on that we've referred to, but also in an increasingly sort of savvy tech world that the data is safe. How can we ensure people that we've got all the right checks and balances, but that it is an important thing to share data with us? Colum, do you want to kick off on that, seeing as that we sort of started and there's a bit of interest in
as a person with a level of expertise around IT that is eternally grateful just to get the thing turned on and actually be on the screen. I'm not sure I can say much about data security or the technicalities of data security, but other than to say from a risk point of view in the organization, it's one of our highest kind of risk areas. We know and take very seriously the fact that we are custodians of people's data, and not just because there's GDPR and lots of rules around that, and that we would be in deep trouble with the Information Commissioner if we were to have any loss or breach of data. So we take it not just because of that, but because we know every individual's data is crucial. So we take all steps to ensure a high level of security, and it's a big component of our organization because we manage masses of information all the time from a large register. But the second thing is also that we only ask the questions we ask people from a mandatory point of view to enable us to put them on the register and ensure we have sufficient information to put them on the register, or specific information if people are in a fitness to practice process that then is very much aligned to an individual. Everything else that we look for is just aggregated up to give a broader picture. And I can understand why people are a bit nervous is, why is the regulator asking me of this? It is simply to register, and if it's not to register, then it's voluntary, and it's just to build that bigger picture and help us disseminate that out. I think that's the reassurance, and we try when we do the surveys and other things to reassure people that is the point. But I can understand why people would ask that question, and all we can really reassure them that we take every step possible and that there are a lot of infrastructure around data protection now that as an organisation we have to comply with no matter what.
Yeah, I think
sorry, Maree, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I absolutely echo what Colum was saying, and certainly for our council, our board, it's always a big area of focus of ensuring both that digital security and the right internal processes around how we're thinking and managing the data. And yeah, I have to say personally, while my heart may sink when I regularly see a data protection impact assessment that I need to fill in, absolutely it shows how seriously it's taken any time we are thinking about sharing data on that aggregated, confidential, non-personalized basis with another organization. Just really carefully thought about whether or not it would be lawful for us to do so, and do we have the right permissions and consent. So yeah, really thoughtful about that in the organization.
Natalie, maybe I would also add, I think reflecting on my work, I lead on a data intelligence work stream for social work here in Northern Ireland under the Programme Board for Social Work Improvement here in the Department of Health. And one of the things I would reflect is social workers want a better data structure, a better access to data. I mean, one of the quotes from one of our surveys I thought is really poignant. And this individual said, we need data to show that the workforce isn't where we want it to be, and make changes to ensure that social work needs are met. So we know we have a challenge right across the UK in each jurisdiction in terms of, you know, that better services and better data for social workers, and they want us to be able to integrate, share the data that's required to make things better. Similarly, we are a body under the Department of Health, so we sit within all of those highly secure firewalls that enable and help and support delivery of health and social care here in Northern Ireland. So we're quite lucky. We're an organisation that sits behind all of that. So, you know, if that fails in any way, then I'd have a real problem with anybody's health and social care record here in Northern Ireland. But thankfully, we don't have any issues. But I think there is a real sense of the importance of trying to identify the key data, trying to get that shared appropriately for better intelligence in terms of, I suppose, improving and making the lives of professional social workers better, you know, day on day because of the challenges that they face.
Thanks, Declan. And just sort of building on that, I mean, some of the questions that we've got through, and I was struck, Maree, by the things that you're describing in terms of, you know, the survey, in terms of leaving the register. There's been some Q&A coming through about how much regulators are collecting information about what social workers are doing in their day-to-day roles, you know, how their role, you know, I think we got some information about the areas that they might work in, but, you know, there seems to be a real drive to understand a bit more about what it looks like day-to-day within the actual roles themselves. And I wonder if colleagues that are doing work on that workforce experience might have anything to share on aspirations or work that's already going on in that particular area.
We'll be publishing ours in the next month or two. I've seen the early drafts of it, so can't really say exactly what's coming out, but there are definitely some interesting things. So we'll be publishing ours in the next month or so. But Sarah, you already have, I think, published results in this area, haven't you?
Yeah, so we've done 2 years where we did a pilot year, and then we've done 1 full year in terms of collecting data from across the workforce in Wales, which really covers how it feels to be a member of the workforce in any one year. And we repeat some of those questions year on year so we can try and get an understanding of things getting better, worse. And it covers a whole range of aspects, from training, learning and development, through to wellbeing, and through to equality and discrimination. So we can just make sure we then collectively, because we've got a social work professional group with partners from across Wales that comes together, and so we'll then look at collectively how we can respond to some of those challenges and issues, and really understand where our focus might need to be, or it needs on to further more detailed work. So it highlights an area of concern that we need to look into further, and certainly we've supplemented some of the survey with focus groups so that we can really try and understand from the workforce what some of those areas of concerns are. But we do it on an annual basis, so it doesn't necessarily give perhaps some of the fluidity that we might want to see within that. That's where we have our practice networks and other groups where we gain direct feedback from professionals in terms of what it's feeling like right now. So you get that sort of the more anecdotal conversational areas that enable us to understand, and that's really important evidence. But we've also got then the quantitative data as well, which with certain interactions we need in order to be able to plan a way forward.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm conscious of time now, but I guess I wonder if any sort of final comments from the panel in terms of your sort of future direction in data, any kind of broader ambitions that you had. We've already come a sort of a long way, but you know, 1 or 2 words on what you kind of hope is going to be the future for data in the sort of social work regulation. Declan, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to jump in first, Natalie, because we have obviously we're into our 3rd year of our real social work improvement programme here across Northern Ireland. And coming from that digital sort of background, you know, ideally for us, it's about, you know, the regulator will not hold all the information about social work and capacity and practice and service delivery. That's sitting in many different data sets among many different employers, but the technology's there to actually connect all of this up. You know, particularly in research and whatever, we collect data for one point in time and it tells us how it looks at that point in time. But actually, we should be able to see this day to day, month to month, and obviously start to model for the future, particularly around what type of social work workforce do we need for the future? What do we want them doing in terms of roles and responsibilities? So from my perspective, the technology is there to connect the regulation data set with all the other key data sets that really reflect the visibility of the social work profession and what they do across Northern Ireland. And actually, if we can do that, then we've got the real intelligence for key decision makers who make those decisions about funding, about where additional posts are required. And I'm pleased to say we've got 2 actions that have already happened here in Northern Ireland because we've done that. One, there's no agency social workers here employed in Northern Ireland. They all have fixed employment with a social work organisation. And that's really important for us, that social workers working here, they have a long-term employment career here in Northern Ireland. And I suppose from our perspective, that's our first big action that's enabled us through connection up of all of those data sets. Plus, finally, 40 new places for social work students this year. And that's all based on data and intelligence that we have collected together here in Northern Ireland. Thanks, Nat.
Thanks, Declan. I am also conscious now of time and of our audience needing probably to finish off their lunch and get back. But I think Declan summarised it well there in terms of just the real sort of possibility that comes with data and the sort of depth of enthusiasm and ambition that sort of sits across us as regulators, wanting to really use that data in a really proactive and positive way, but a safe way to drive positive change on some of the big issues that is facing the social work profession. So a huge thanks to all of our speakers. As predicted, we ran right up to the wire in terms of time, but a really rich discussion. So thanks to Maree, to Declan, to Sarah, to Colum for their contributions today. And thank you to the audience. Please do feedback on the form. Let us know how you thought. Let us know what you thought. And please do engage with all of the debates and the rest of the programs of events here at Social Work Week. And thank you again for joining us this afternoon and enjoy your Thursday.
Thank you. Bye.